I know I've talked about Luke Hughes and Dougie Hamilton generating some points on the Devils' blue line, but let's talk about some other players that have been showcasing their skill set during the preseason. And also, let's talk about how the defensive pairing should look like during the regular season. And let's talk about the Devils' offensive production in general, because it's been very impressive and everyone's been contributing. There's a lot to discuss in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils Ride for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. My apologies for being absent the last couple days. Unfortunately, I had to deal with an obligation that took more of my time than I anticipated. I tried to give you guys some sort of content the last few days. So if you guys didn't check out the latest bonus episode, shout out to the Locked On Podcast Network for putting that together. It was basically a preview episode featuring a lot of the Locked On NHL hosts previewing their teams going into the 2023-2024 season. Also on the YouTube channel, I did a small collaboration with Gil Martin, the host of Locked On Islanders and one of the co-hosts of Locked On NHL, and he asked me some questions regarding the Devils going into the new year. So if you hadn't checked out those last few episodes, please pause this episode and give it a look. But I am back, and we're going to talk about the Devils' 5-2 victory against the New York Rangers a couple days ago, and now the Devils are still undefeated in preseason with a record of 6-0-0, and they have one more game remaining on the preseason schedule. They'll be taking on the New York Islanders a little later on in the day when this episode goes live. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about the possibility of the Devils going undefeated. Does it change my perspective on preseason? Because I think a lot of you know who've been listening to my show the last few weeks or so, you guys are well aware that I'm not the biggest fan of preseason, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail as to why that's the case. Then we're going to talk about the productivity from the defensemen for the Devils, because it's not just defense, but it's also offense that's been their bread and butter during these preseason games, and it's been surprising me, quite honestly. Then in the second segment, I'll give you guys my 3 stars of the game against the Rangers and also talk about the game in general. And then to round it all off, like I do with every post-game recap, I will give the Devils some sort evaluation. And once again, during the preseason, it's either pass or fail. So let's start off with the Devils' preseason record. So like I said moments ago, the Devils have a preseason record of 6-0-0. And according to Kyle McKenna, who is one of the PR team members for the Devils, I highly suggest following him on the X app. He's a great guy. He put out this interesting fact and said, NHL teams that finish a preseason with an undefeated record since the 2005-2006 season, he listed them off. The San Jose Sharks did it in 2005. The Ottawa Senators did it in 2007. The Calgary Flames did it in 2010. And the Colorado Avalanche did it in 2016. Now, if you're wondering what happened to these teams when the game started for real, the Sharks during the 2005-2006 season, they finished second in the Pacific Division. Then the Ottawa Senators 2007-2008 season, they finished second in the Northeast Division. Then the Flames finished second in the Northwest Division 2010-2011. But the last team that we need to talk about and kind of highlights my points of the preseason is that Avalanche team from the 2016-2017 season. So courtesy of our friend Ryan Novozinski of NJ.com, he put out this interesting fact on the X app. He said, the Devils are looking to become the first team since the 2016-2017 Avalanche to go undefeated in the preseason. However, he put this in parentheses, that Avalanche team went 22-56-4 that season. So if you guys are wondering why I'm not the biggest fan of preseason, there's your answer right there, because the preseason is not the regular season, and I really don't want to look too far into the storylines. Now, am I saying that the Devils are going to have like 22 or so wins? Absolutely not. They're going to surpass that with ease. But the one thing I just don't want to do is like read too far into some narratives, storylines, because these games don't really count for real. No one's really keeping track. No one's really looking at the stats. It's really just an over-glorified tryout for some players like Alexander Holtz, Shimon Nemeth, trying to make a case for themselves as to why they should be on the opening night roster, because we already know what Jack Hughes is going to do. We already know what Nico Hischier is going to do. We know what Jesper Bratt's going to do. We know what Timo Meier is going to do. And we're just going to have to wait and see how the season shapes up for players like Akira Schmid and Vitek Vanacek. But at the end of the day, what are our expectations for our star players? We expect for them to play well, whether it's the preseason, regular season, or playoffs. The narrative doesn't really change, but the only difference between preseason, regular season, and playoffs, two of the things that I just listed actually count towards something. Whereas the preseason, there's no trophy at the end of the day. There's really nothing to write home about. Like I said, it's not really a real NHL season. It's just a bunch of beta NHL games just to get your feet wet, dust off those cobwebs. I don't want to touch on it too much, but that's my overall thing on preseason. I don't know if it's a hot take or not, but the one thing I'm just optimistically cautious. I just don't want to overstep anything. I don't want to look too far into it. I don't want to stretch anything. So I just look at preseason as just a way to give some of these young guys a chance to showcase themselves at a somewhat competitive NHL level, because not everyone plays every single game. But I think you guys get the point. Let's switch subjects on this segment. So let's talk about the defensive production for the Devils on the offensive side of things. So Kevin Ball, he has appeared in 4 preseason games, and he has 4 points, 4 assists. Marino, 4 preseason games. He has 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points. Remember, he had a huge outing against the New York Islanders. Shimon Nemeth, he has appeared in 3 preseason games. He has 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points. Luke Hughes, 3 preseason games. Remember, he was dealing with nagging injuries during training camp and also Prospects Challenge. He has 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points. Dougie Hamilton, our star player on the defensive side of things, even he is having somewhat of an impact. He has appeared in 3 preseason games, and he has 2 points, 2 assists. So the overall question is, like, is this one of the aspects of preseason that I'm actually going to dig deep on? Is it something that I'm going to try to hold accountable going into the regular season? I think in this case, it's definitely an interesting talking point, because Ken Danico said it a few times during the course of preseason, which is there's a huge gaping hole that needs to be filled for the Devils on the defensive side of things, because with the subtractions of Damon Severson and also Ryan Graves, the Devils need to generate more offense on the defensive side of things. And now it's up for grabs, because we already know what Dougie Hamilton is going to do, but who's going to step up? So I've been really impressed with the overall production from Kevin Ball. He's skating really well. He's putting up a lot of points. John Marino, he surprised me with some of his skating and stick abilities, especially in that Islanders game, because it's been confirmed that Marino has never had a multi-goal outing at all during his entire NHL career. Shimon Nemeth, he's made some mistakes, but at least he makes up for it. Luke Hughes, we're hoping that he could give Connor Bedard a run for his money for the Calder. And then for Dougie Hamilton, hopefully he could get back to being a finalist for the Norris Trophy. So we have all sorts of expectations for certain defensemen for the Devils, obviously more than others when it comes to offense. But I think I agree with Dano's point of view, which is who's going to step up, because obviously we think it's going to be Dougie Hamilton, and we thought maybe the other player would be Luke Hughes. But Kevin Ball is showing something. John Marino is showing something. Shimon Nemeth is trying to make a case for himself. So I've been very impressed with the Devils' defensive production, at least on the offensive side of things, during this preseason. Like I said, I don't want to read too far into it, but it's definitely a curious subject that I'm willing to entertain for at least the first few weeks of the regular season. So just some food for thought. But on the flip side of that, Alex Chavancy, now formerly of the Hockey Writers, which, by the way, best wishes to Alex moving forward. He's a friend of the show. He confirmed that he's still going to write for the Devils, just with a different writing organization. So once again, best wishes moving forward to friend of the show, Alex Chavancy. But during the game, Alex put out this interesting thought on the X app. He said, the biggest concern that I have about the Devils heading into the regular season is that third defensive pair. Luke Hughes and Brendan Smith had the worst expected goal shares among Devils skaters tonight. Best solution there is probably to get Colin Miller comfortable with Lindy Ruff's system. So that is an interesting thought from Alex, and it's something that I want to talk about on the show because he's absolutely right. Because when we look at what the Devils rolled out on the previous game, on the top defensive pair, you had Siegenthaler and Hamilton. Then on the second defensive pair, you have Ball and Marino. And then on the third defensive pair, you got Luke and Brendan Smith. So the thing is like, how is that going to shape up, at least on the bottom four for the Devils? Because like I said, with Ball's offensive surgence during the preseason and him skating really well, it seems like Lindy is trying to promote him to the top four defensive role. And I get that, and it's definitely well-deserved. But on the flip side of this, and this is just my personal opinion, I'm not a coach or anything, this is just what I see from my own perspective. I think the Devils need to keep Ball on the bottom four defensive pairing, at least on that third line, because the one thing that I raved about the Devils' defensive system during the offseason is that you have one player who's capable of putting up a lot of offensive production, but on the other side of that, you have a player that can hold down the fort on the blue line and is tasked to play some solid defense. So for Dougie Hamilton and Jonas Siegenthaler, obviously Dougie is going to be tasked with doing the scoring, and Jonas Siegenthaler is going to focus on the defense. That's why Siegenthaler, despite playing well during the preseason, does not have a single point during these last few games. And then on the second defensive pairing, I think you have to put Luke Hughes on that pairing with Marino, because we saw it work during the Carolina Hurricane series. But the thing is like, just for the sake of balancing out, you got to put Hughes with someone who's capable of playing defense, because let's face it, I know Smith is a great character in the locker room, and I know he is beloved by Lindy Ruff. And quite honestly, Smith was one of my favorite players to interview during the course of last season. And he's probably the guy that you want to have at your family barbecue or whatever case might be, because he's so lively, he's so energetic, he's so jubilant, he's a very good conversationalist, yada, yada, yada. Love Brendan Smith, and I think that carries over into the locker room. But the facts are there. He is not a good hockey player for the most part. Like, he racks up a lot of unnecessary penalties, and sometimes he's more of a liability out there. And he's well aware that his impact is probably more felt in the locker room than it is on the sheet of ice. But that's just my 2-cent opinion. So I think it's safe to say that Smith won't be a consistent starter for the Devils. But I think for that third right-handed defensive pairing, is it going to be Shimon Nemets or is it going to be Colin Miller? It's basically going to have to be pick your poison, because the thing about Miller is that I talked about a lot of great production from the Devils' defense, but where's he been? He's been making a few mistakes, but he doesn't seem to redeem himself in any which sort of way. Whereas for Shimon Nemets, yes, he might not be NHL ready, and yes, he does make a few mistakes himself, but the one thing I can say for Nemets, at least he makes it up somehow, some way, because he has 3 points in 3 preseason appearances. And remember, during the Prospects Challenge, he appeared in 2 of the 3 games, and he came away with 2 points, which were 2 assists. So that's my thing. I think Shimon Nemets, you can clean it up just a little bit, because the one thing I can say for Nemets, at least he'll redeem himself in some sort of way. But to answer Alex's question, it's just my opinion alone, I think you got to put Ball on the third defensive pairing, and then you put another offensive caliber player on that right-handed side. So I'd say it might have to be Nemets. I get it, but that's why you have Ball alongside with Nemets, because Ball can focus on the defense and also some of the offense if he's capable of doing so. And then for Nemets, he can focus on the offense, and then you try to get him up to par for the defensive capabilities for the Devils. But I get it. It might be a revolving door because Miller is just unfortunately not showing me anything. And the Mets, he's almost ready, but maybe he needs to remain in Utica for like a week or 2. But I don't think Hughes and the Mets are going to be paired side by side. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Lindy Ruff isn't going to try to risk that, because that's going to be a nightmare and a half. But that's basically what I wanted to give credit to for the Devils' defensive production, because their offensive capabilities seems to have taken a few steps forward during preseason. Like I said, try not to read too far into it, but it's something that I wanted to talk about on today's episode. Okay, let's transition from defensive capabilities and also some holes that need to be filled to the game in general for the Devils against the Rangers. The one thing you can guarantee between the Rangers and the Devils, that both teams are going to play physical. It doesn't matter if it's preseason, regular season or playoffs, you can best believe that both teams are going to give it their all, and you love to see that during a rivalry matchup. But the one thing I don't like to see is dirty hits, and that's exactly what Jacob Trouba did once again, this time not to Timo Meier, but to Tyler Toffoli. In fact, Toffoli was taking a big beating during the course of the game. It seemed like he had a big X on his jersey. I don't know if Toffoli said something pregame, wherever the case might be, but Toffoli was getting beat out there, and none of those hits were really clean. But Kevin Ball, the one thing I like to see from the Devils is fight back and make a statement, play assertive, because that's the one thing that I've been seeing for the preseason for the Devils is that right from the get-go, they seem to play with some sort of purpose. They seem to play somewhat aggressive, and we saw that when Kevin Ball had a huge hit on Ryan Lindgren. So, yes, it wasn't on Trouba. I would have loved it for Trouba to get some payback, but Ball was making a statement, and I love to see that from Ball because, once again, asserting himself defensively, but also taking steps in his offensive production. So, love the overall effort from both respective teams. I got to give the Rangers their props. They came out and tried to play aggressive, but hey, there's no quit in New Jersey. Remember that. Okay, so let's talk about some players that kind of caught my eye during Wednesday's preseason matchup. So let's go with honorable mention, and that is Jack Hughes, because Hughes was able to score on the power play, but it wasn't him like using his speed to his advantage, going deep on it. No. Toffoli set him up nicely on a one-timer attempt, and Hughes finished. Like, I was like, wait a minute, that's in Hughes' bag? It seems like during this preseason, like, we're seeing all sorts of players just reach deep into their bag. So I talked about Marino reaching deep into his bag against the Islanders and putting on a razzle-dazzle performance. And now in the matchup against the Rangers, it was Hughes who was reaching into his bag and basically just finishing on a sweet one-timer attempt from Toffoli. And I don't think anyone saw that coming. And Lindy Ruff said post-game that he thinks that Hughes' shot has gotten much better. And that's saying something, and that could be scary for the rest of the league. So I was really excited to see Hughes basically let that type of shot go, because every time he tried to attempt that sort of shot attempt, I would just say, no, that's not in your repertoire. That's not your game. But he made it work this game. But I'll just say one thing, even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. But if Hughes wants to be a great player, just keep adding more to your game, and you're going to be unstoppable before you know it. Now, 3 stars of the game. First, let's focus on Jesper Bratt, because Jesper Bratt had another successful point showing for the Devils during preseason. So a few episodes ago, I told you guys that I wasn't able to find Bratt's preseason stats, but I told you that they were relatively high. Well, courtesy of James Nichols of New Jersey Hockey Now, he put out the points for the Devils during preseason, and in 4 game appearances, Bratt has 5 goals, 4 assists, total of 9 points. That is amazing. And I know it's preseason. I know I'm not the biggest fan of it, but even I can't ignore that. Bratt having 9 points in 4 game appearances, that is incredible. And it raises the question, which is Bratt ready to become an 80 to 90 point scorer? Because it's something that that Bill Spalding brought up in one of the recent telecasts, which is now that Bratt has signed that extension, it might be time for Bratt to develop his game even further and just take that stress off his shoulders. Now that's been alleviated, it's been taken care of. Maybe Bratt can focus more on hockey. I know I talked about it not too long ago, but Bratt, he's just amazing me during this preseason, and he's playing consistently, and that's another X factor going into the regular season that we need to highlight, which is Bratt and his overall consistency. Because remember, he started to fizzle on out come mid-January, and if he wanted to go to the All-Star game, he would have had to rely too much on the advanced analytics. But now, can he take it even a step further? Can he go from underrated to basically one of the crucial components for Devils, at least recognized by the entire NHL discourse? So that's my thing. Jesper has been impressing me, and one thing I love in this game for the Devils is, once again, they came aggressive out the get-go. So as soon as Bratt scored, guess who also scored? Luke Hughes, just moments afterwards, making a 2-0 game. Those goals were within like a 20-second frame. So congratulations to Bratt for having a great preseason performance. And if they did give out awards during preseason, you best believe that Bratt is my MVP. Now, Second star of the game, Andre Palat. And here's why. Did you know that Palat got the secondary goal on Bratt's goal? He got the secondary goal on Luke Hughes' goal. And he also got the secondary goal on Jack Hughes' power play goal. So that's a 3-point performance from Andre Palat. Now, recently I said that I pegged for Palat to have a bounce back season for Devils now that he's fully healthy, now that he'll actually have a full season of play, hopefully ahead of him in a New Jersey sweater. I think Andre Palat is on the right track, and the fact that he was able to have that productive of a day against the Rangers, it gives me some hope because Palat has 4 points in 3 game appearances this preseason. So that cannot go unnoticed. And no one was really talking about it because the thing is like Palat had a good game, but I didn't see it on the X app. I didn't really see anyone on Devils Discourse talking about it. And I'm just like, we need to talk about that a little bit more because Palat had a 3-point performance. I get it. They were all on secondary assists, but that's still very impressive. And we need to talk more about that. So I'm excited to see what Palat can do this upcoming season. And I feel like he has a few tricks up his sleeve. Now, I know that he's probably not going to be given the role that he wanted when he initially signed, but make the most of it. So that third line of Andre Palat, Erik Haula, and Dawson Mercer, I think that's going to be an interesting pairing. I think a lot of teams would actually think that's a solid line combination. And I think if that's the Devils' third line, then they're going to be very scary. Now, speaking of Dawson Mercer, I'm actually very proud of this. So consider this my first prediction that came into fruition. So before the game, like I always do on the Locked On Devils' X page, I tweet out the line combinations, and sometimes I'll share my thoughts. But this time I was feeling somewhat dangerous. I was like, let's do a prediction. So I said before puck drop, I feel like it's Dawson Mercer's turn to make some noise during the preseason. And lo and behold, he is my first star of the game, but he's not only my first star of the game, he was the NHL's first star of the game during that Rangers and Devils matchup. So I said it was his turn, and he came through for me. So Mercer was able to score himself, and he also had an assist. So he got an assist on the Luke Hughes goal, thanks to a screen set out in front by Erik Haula. Mercer set him up on a dime on the far side, and Hughes was able to score. And then Mercer, once again, was able to score himself. So Meier was storming up ahead on the sheet of ice. He lost his footing a little bit. He got tangled up with a Rangers player. Puck is loose, still in the possession of the Devils. Rangers didn't really get control of it. So Mercer was able to charge on in, grab the puck, and he scored. Now, the netting did get messed up on his goal, and I was afraid that they were going to wave it off or not count it, but it did count because apparently he scored it before the netting got messed up. So Mercer was credited with a goal, and Meier was credited with an assist. So I like that dynamic duo between Timo Meier and one of the younger but faster players. So I talked about it with Meier and Hughes, but this time it's Meier and Mercer. So thank you, Dawson Mercer, for making my prediction, I guess my first unofficial prediction of the season coming to fruition. Now, I'm going to give the Devils some sort of evaluation in the third and final segment. But before we continue, the season is fast approaching, and I'm sure you want to see the Devils play live and in person. So here's the thing. You shouldn't have to worry about when you're buying tickets to the next big game. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. So last-minute ticket deals, flash deals, zone deals, easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. Views from all seats in the venue, lowest price guaranteed, event cancellation protection, job loss production, etc. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL, LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And speaking of seeing the Devils up close and personal, why not make some money off them? So don't just focus on the NHL season. Snap into the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. And remember, visit FanDuel and include some Devils money lines, props, etc. So make some money this NHL season and this current NFL season, but remember to do so responsibly. All right, let's give the Devils a pass or fail type of grade. But before we do, like I do with every post-game recap, let's compare the stats, and then I will give my final verdict. So, shots on goal differential, 21-19 in favor of the Rangers, but the fact that the Devils had 19 shots and 5 of them were goals, that's really impressive, quite honestly. Face-off percentage, 45.8% to the Devils, 54.2% to the Rangers. Power play, Devils were 3 for 5 on the man advantage. So the Travis Greenhouse effect is in full swing right now. So it's been really impressive with how the Devils have been performing on the power play this preseason. I know it's preseason, but still, the fact that the Devils are capitalizing on those chances this early, get yourself into a groove. So Bratt had a power play goal, then Mercer, then Jack Hughes. So good showing for the Devils. Power play for the Rangers, 1 for 4. Hits 26-18 in favor of the Rangers. Blocks, dead even, 9 apiece. So pass fail for the Devils. I'm going to give them a pass because, quite honestly, they performed somewhat decent. They played physical. They answered on back. They scored when they needed to. And like any other preseason game, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't the best showing, but it wasn't the worst showing either because, quite honestly, I think their previous showing before the Rangers against the Islanders, I think that was a tad bit worse. In fact, no, I thought it was much worse, and I was teeter-tottering as to whether or not I gave the Devils a pass-fail. But the fact that they scored a lot of goals and that top line of Toffoli, Hughes, and Bratt really showed out to play, I gave them a pass. So, yep, Devils get a pass this time around. Let's see if they can finish the preseason undefeated. But like I said, just because you go undefeated in the preseason doesn't guarantee anything. But the fact that the Devils are projected to be a contender out in the Metro, it does give me some hope. So hopefully they can finish like how the Sharks, Senators, and Flames did, which is at least finish second in the Metro. Because remember, like I said at the top of the episode, Sharks, Senators, and Flames, they went undefeated at one point during their respective preseasons, and they actually had very good regular seasons and got to the playoffs. But that one team, the Avalanche, went undefeated back in 2016, and that season was a dumpster fire. But the Avalanche did end up winning the Stanley Cup final a few years later. So we'll see what happens. I try not to think too far into it. I know I sound like a broken record when I say this, but as for today's episode, guys, that's all the time I have for you. So leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on a podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X page app at TreyMatt4 and the show's X page app at Locked On Devils. And like I do to close out every show, continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening once again.